Great. Good evening, and we're welcoming those that are tuning in online to our Bible study here at Loris First Baptist Church on October the 6th. Boy, this year has gone by fast. For whatever reason, it just seems like it's flying by. But we are not flying through Genesis. I have done that before, but then I realized there's a lot of things in here that are so critical that for whatever reason, I guess we all consider their stories, and so let's just get through that and get to the facts. Let's get to the laws, or let's get to the tabernacle, or let's get to Jesus, and those are all wonderful things to get to, but there's a reason why God wants us to know about Jacob and Laban and about what's going on between Esau and Jacob when they get back together. And so we're going to go through these things a little bit slow, but I think ultimately it'll benefit you in the future. I had a guy today ask me a question about something we've already covered in Genesis, and he goes, there's a lot of things Moses just seemed to leave out, and you have to kind of guess as you go along. And I told him, you wouldn't have to guess if you would turn on our own church's media and you could listen to, because what he asked we've covered in Genesis, and he said, well, there's just a lot in Genesis I don't understand. I said, that's why I'm covering it on Wednesday nights. And he goes, oh, okay. And I'm like, goodness gracious, I thought everybody knew that we meet on Wednesdays and we're covering this. But I do know that some of the questions he had, he was talking with other people in our church, and he said, we just got into a discussion about it, and we had no idea what the answer was. We wanted to know if you knew. And I go, yeah, I do. Turn on episode number 3 on our media thing of Genesis, and you'll get it. So hopefully he's tuned in tonight. All right, here we go. We're in chapter 31. Now, chapter 30 ended with some strange stuff going on, if you remember. But when you actually read between the lines and then also what's presented later in chapter 31, you see something that Jacob has been promised by God in Bethel that he was going to turn him into a mighty nation, that he was going to end up having many children, and those children would end up becoming many descendants as the sand, on the shoreline, and that he was going to bless him with great wealth. And Jacob's made a promise, God, if you do that for me, I'm going to give you a tenth. He makes a vow saying, I'm going to give God a tenth of everything. And he heads on to Haran, which is 500 miles north of where he had been living in Beersheba with his mother and father and his brother. And of course, he was running from Esau, and he's heading now to hopefully to safety with his mother's family, where Laban is at. What he doesn't realize is he's running away from trouble into trouble. They say the grass is not always greener on the other side. Well, in this case, the grass is greedier on the other side. Laban is exactly what Jacob needed to be taught lessons, and I believe God had it all arranged. And remember, Jacob's name means supplanter, cheater, trickster, and so he has this characteristic about him of trying to take care of matters his own way. He figures out ways to scheme things to get what he wants. And you're going to see as we go through chapters 31 to 35 that God breaks him. God breaks him. Laban is a part of it, but ultimately God breaks him. So let's take him as somebody that comes to a relationship with God at Bethel. That was his, what you would say at that time, almost a born-again experience, but he's an immature Christian. But there are some things about him that are good. He's a hard worker, and he works hard, and he wants to marry Rachel, but he doesn't have anything. And so when he comes to Laban, and Laban says, well, I can see you're very talented. You've been working with your father's herd, so you know something about taking care of flocks, so I'm willing to pay you a wage. and you can work for me. And Jacob says, well, I'd like to marry Rachel. I'll work for you for 7 years. Well, you know, I love Ruth Ann, but I don't know if I'd have worked for free for 7 years, a sight unseen there like that, but he did. And then we know he got tricked. But he didn't put up a big fight, and you can imagine why. I don't think he could say, how dare you that pretends to be someone and they weren't, and they tricked me. You know, that's exactly what he had done. And I don't know about you, but I've had things happen to me that infuriated me, but when I slowed down a little bit, I said, yeah, that's what I've done to somebody else. It just came back on me. I don't believe in karma, but I do believe in God's discipline. And sometimes God will take the consequences of your sin and turn it against you to help you learn to repent of sin and realize that what you do to others will eventually be done to you if you're not careful. So he ends up with Leah, and then he agrees to work 7 more years for Rachel. So he's worked 14 years. And then if you remember in chapter 30, he tells Laban, I want to go home. I want to take my family and I want to head for home. And at this time, Laban is making some, he's saying, you know, I know that your God is with you. And Laban goes out of his way to make sure that we know that Laban is spiritual, but he's not a born-again Christian. He is not after the God Jehovah. He has his own set of gods. But he recognizes there's something different about Jacob, that God's blessing him. And he says, I would like you to stay and work for me because I have benefited so much from your work. And so name your wages again. Name your wages. Because, of course, it worked out for him for 14 years. And he's saying, you name what the wages are, and maybe we can come up with an agreement. And then that's, after the end of that period of time, you can then take your family and go, and you'll have something. And then Jacob comes up with the strangest plan. If you've ever read this for the first time, I don't know about y'all when you first read it, you know, what is this? You know, cutting a little tree and sticking it in the water and the speckled and the spotted and all this. Well, some of it needs to be understood from a background that some of these things are old shepherd's tales and old tricks that they go by. But ultimately, Jacob spills the beans. He said he had a dream. That God gave him a dream, and he said all of the animals that were coming to mate kept producing speckled and spotted instead of the predominant colors. So he already had that information, and he didn't need to put sticks in the ground and do all kinds of these old wives' tales type stuff. I've seen Christians. I went in to visit a Christian shut-in, and when I came in, she threw salt over her shoulder, and when we walked the door, there was a horseshoe over the front of the door. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just going to brain somebody. That ain't going to help anybody or bless them. But what are we doing with rabbit's foots, dream catchers, salt over the shoulder? You know, what is all this? We're children of God. We shouldn't have all this stuff. But I think that Jacob shows himself to be someone says, I hear you, God, and I believe in your promises, but I'm going to help you out a little bit, just in case. Aren't you glad we're not like that? That we don't try to take things into our own hands, even though God's promised, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to provide for you. You say, yeah, but I still think I need to do some things. And remember, it is not in the Bible, God helps those that help themselves. That is not in the Bible. You know what's in the Bible? Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your pathway straight. And then it says, make sure you bless God with the first fruits of all of your heart, and your barns will be filled. So God's telling you, I'll take care. You don't have to scheme and do that. Just be obedient. Trust in me. Well, Jacob tells Laban, all of the predominant colors, the black goats, the white sheep, the brown cattle, those are all yours. And I don't want any wages. It's just whenever there's a spotted one or a striped one born, that belongs to me. Well, Laban sit there for a moment. Now remember, he's got, at this time, 10 grandchildren, and he's got his daughters all involved. And instead of saying, no, I got to make sure that my grandchildren are well taken care of, instead he agrees to this right away. I mean, he's like, okay, sounds great. May it be, as you have said. And the idea being, he go, boy, you're a hard worker and you're strong with your body, but you ain't too strong up here. And so he agrees to it. And I believe if Jacob would have done nothing except let the animals do what animals do, it would have all worked out. But Jacob is going through all this stuff, which scientifically we know wouldn't work today. You can stick it in water, you can do all kinds of things. You could take the very types, and people have tried this to see, and they can't make this work. The only reason it worked here is because God had already told him that's what he was going to do. So don't think that Jacob is some smart, shepherd that's figured out a way to make striped animals out of predominant colors of the parents. This was something God had planned. He knew Laban would go for the plan because Laban didn't mind cheating his own children and grandchildren out of an inheritance. He didn't mind that. That's the character of Laban. He's greedy, he wants things, and he doesn't care if it hurts even his own relatives. But Jacob is just showing a little bit of lack of faith. But he gets good results, but it's because of God's divine. God determines whether or not these animals are going to come out. Well, the animals come out, and you find at the end of chapter 30, you hear this. He said, in this way, the man, that's Jacob, grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. So God fulfills his promise to Jacob that he is rich. And then we get to chapter 31. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all of his wealth from what belonged to our father. Notice what they didn't say. He's worked 20 years, 14 of those for nothing, to make our father rich. No, it's the sons are, to me, are like those millionaire sons just hanging out. Why aren't they out there doing all this work? Why is Jacob the one seeming to be doing all the work? But they're complaining about the results. But they don't seem to be giving Jacob credit for the things he has done. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what he had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land, your fathers, and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So go back. Jacob, at least, Jacob had a heart to want to go back. He had already told Laban that he wanted to go back before this deal was made. So he had a heart that he wanted to go back. But God hadn't told him to go back yet. And so you know what he did? He worked hard until God made the pathway straight. That's the good news. Jacob wasn't someone to just quickly just take off and go. He's very patient about those things. And so when God says go, it says, so Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. And he said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. So what you see here is you're getting information that we didn't know, that as he was working for Laban, Laban kept changing the deal that he had with Jacob. We don't know exactly how the changes were being made, but his daughters know that's going on because they agree with him. But he said, if he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. But then he said, no, the streaked ones will be your wages. See, now he's sharing with you, originally all the streaked all the speckled, all it was to be Jacob's. And the ones that came out with the predominant colors were to be Laban's. But when God started having all the animals be born, then Laban's now coming, no, I get the streaked ones, you only get the speckled ones. And so that's what's going. But then guess what God does? Start making all the ones coming out speckled ones, and then striped ones. And so Laban is trying to constantly turn things in his favor. But then he says this, he goes, so God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. There are a lot of people that read chapter 30 and believe that Jacob is just one of those bad employees that's trying to cheat his boss. It's the other way around. Jacob has done everything to make his boss prosperous, and it's like his boss says, if you'll do this and this, I'll give you this promotion. And then you meet that goal and you don't get the promotion. They say, well, but if you'll work a little bit harder, I'll do this. And the end result is you're making them rich, and they're doing everything they can to barely even give you a raise. And so that's the kind of person he's working for. And so God is blessing him just like he promised to do. And he said, in breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I've seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel. Now he's reminding Jacob of something that had taken place 14 years earlier. Jacob's given you the information of the dream that led him to make this deal with Laban. Does this make more sense now? He didn't just arbitrarily come up with this on his own. God was leading him to make this deal with Laban, and then Laban kept trying to manipulate it, and God kept going. So the only thing Jacob did wrong was try to help God with all kinds of witchcraft stuff. And, if I stick this in the water, this will make it. That didn't really have any effect. It was God's divine plan to make him rich anyway. He said, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now he's reminding him, I'm going to make you rich, but don't forget your vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Now what they're saying there is they didn't like the way this deal all went down. Basically, Jacob and Laban were making deals for them, and they didn't have a say in the matter. And you could say, well, that's kind of the custom that goes on right now in Israel. Well, I can tell you for a fact that I have seen arranged marriages. But I will tell you that the arranged marriages that I have seen have been more along the line of the parents finding and coming back and letting the daughter know, this is what he's like, this is what the family's like, and if you agree to this, this is what will happen, this is where you'll live, this is how you'll be taken care of. And she does have a say. And so they did not have a say, and I don't think they liked the tricking part where Leah went in and then Rachel then had to wait, and then when Rachel goes in, now Rachel's going, well, I thought that Jacob loved me, and yet you gave my sister. And I'm sure the sister said, it sure didn't feel good, being the only way I got a husband was being tricked into it. So all these family dynamics, when I hear somebody say, you don't understand, I had a dysfunctional family, I go, read the Bible. This doesn't shock God that families do all kinds of crazy things to each other. But the other thing is he worked for 7 years, was making Laban rich. But guess what Laban was doing? Instead of using that as a dowry and also blessing his daughters with it, he was just giving them to him and now almost trying to make their husband poor, which would make them poor and all their children poor. So they're saying, not only has he sold us, he's used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us anyway and our children. So do whatever God has told you. So I'm sure Jacob took them way out into the field. He doesn't know what they're going to do. They may say, we don't want to leave. We've always lived here. This is where our home is. But he's, I guess, shocked. They're like going, no, we're with you. You loved us so much that you were willing to work for each of us for 7 years, and we have children with you. And I think they see the integrity of Jacob, where he's tried to do the right thing. They've seen their father trying to be deceitful, and so they're like going, we're with you. Let's go. So there you go. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wife on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of them, along with all the goods he accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now, they are 300 miles from the border. They're 500 miles to where Isaac and Rachel live, but they're 300 miles to the border. Now, imagine you're traveling. Probably Reuben is about 12 years old right now. He's the oldest. And you've got all these young children, all the way down to practically babies. And you got all this livestock and all this camels and cows and all that. And you got to move that 300 miles. How fast can you go? You know, that's the point. Probably, if you really are pushing, you could do 20 miles a day. Because you're putting at least the children and the women on the animals, but still, 20 miles of walking a day, day in and day out. Try that. That'll wear your legs and arms if you're not used to that. So when Laban had gone to shear his sheep, that's the key. That Laban is focused on shearing the sheep and getting that, and doesn't pay attention to what they're doing. Remember, he moved his herd 3 days away from wherever Jacob was, just to make sure that none of the speckled or none of the striped or any of those that he had in his flock already could possibly get involved with what Jacob was doing, because then that may dilute some of his herd. So he got 3 days away, so they've got a 3-day head start on him anyway. And moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the 3rd day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him. Of course, he's just riding hard, you know. And so you kind of got John Wayne pushing the wagon trail, and you got the Indians coming, and they don't have anything stopping them. They're on their way, and they're ready for scalps. But look what it says. He caught up with them in the hill country of Gilead. Then God, and that's in the northern part, you can see Mount Gilead if you go to the Sea of Galilee and you get up, all those mountains to the north up there are the Gilead Mountains, and so they're coming very close to where the Sea of Galilee is from the north there. And Laban stops there to sleep, and I think he's getting his strength up. They're like, hey, we've caught up with them. We know where they're at. We get up in the morning, we're taking that herd. We're taking my daughter. We're coming back, and we're going to kill Jacob. But look what it says. God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, neither good nor bad. Now, do you think Jacob knew that God did this? And the answer is no. And you see, there are a lot of times we think we have to scheme, we have to deceive, we have to do things, because if we don't, how could it possibly work out? But remember, when God makes promises, that he has promised Jacob, I'm going to bring you back to this land, you're going to inherit this land, your descendants are going to... So of course he can't be killed by Laban. It's just not possible to be happening. But Jacob still is a man of little faith. He's a hard worker. He loves his wives. He loves his children. But he just does not really understand a good faith relationship with God. And so he struggles with that. Even though God has blessed him and shown him so much, from the time of the angels going up and down on the ladder to getting him right to where he needed to be in order to meet Rachel and meet Rebekah's family, just like that. I mean, everything is just going. But it's like, even though God has shown him blessings all along the way, the next time he runs into a difficulty, he starts to scheming or he gets afraid. And I always tell everybody, you need to have faith markers. You need to say, man, God was with me here, and God was with me here, and God was with me here. And here he has promised that if I'm faithful to him, he'll never leave. So he'll be with me. Now, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know it will. And instead of scheming and worrying and being afraid and crying and calling the psychic hotline or looking to see what your sign is saying in the newspaper or going to a palm reader, goodness gracious, just trust that God has ways of working that he doesn't have to share with you. But when he makes a promise, he will fulfill it. And the neat thing is when you don't scheme and you don't do crazy things behind the scenes and you don't try to do your own thing, you just simply say, I know this is going to work. I know that God is going to bless us. I don't know how and I don't know it, but I know that I'm going to be protected. When it happens, you get to rejoice with God. And you get a double blessing. Not only the blessing of seeing God do something miraculous, but the blessing of knowing you put your faith in the right one. And he honors that. But we are so slow. So this story about Jacob a lot of time is the story of Christians as they're going through their walk. Get excited when they first meet God, but then they go back to doing the best they can with their own intelligence, their own skills, doing whatever they can to make life work out for them, but they're struggling all the time. And yet God is still working behind the scenes because he still loves them. But it's frustrating, I'm sure, for God. It's just he's a very patient God. So he told Laban, don't say anything good or bad. You know what he's basically saying? He's saying, you better not go in there, and you better not touch him. You better not curse him. You better not do anything because he belongs to me. You know why he said don't say anything good? He goes, you better not bless him because you are not blessing him through me. You got false gods. And I don't want whatever happens to Jacob ever to be attributed to the fact, well, Laban gave him his blessing. You follow what I'm saying? So he said, Laban, you will have nothing to do with what is the future of Jacob. That's me. So if you say anything whatsoever, good or bad, I'm going to deal with you. And Laban took that to heart. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You've deceived me. Now see, Laban's learning a lesson too. Laban deceived Jacob, but you never once in all of the dealings between them after that first encounter, Jacob never once mentions this deception. And you'll see it even as he gets ready to just blast Laban. He does not mention what Laban did to him with Leah. And I've thought about that, and I've read about that, and something I came across says, I believe it with all my heart. This is why. If he had said, Laban, I can't believe you stuck me with Leah when I wanted Rachel. Now, remember, she is now the mother of 6 of his children. Really, 8 total. 8 of his. And now think about what their relationship would be if he's using that as a complaint and saying, I never wanted her to begin with, and you gave it. I think Jacob does love her now, that he does value her. And so he doesn't mention it. You'll see there's a time, we're coming to it, where Laban is trying to blast Jacob, and Jacob for the first time just gives Laban what he deserves, but watch, he won't mention the deception of Leah. And I think that's very honorable. I think he did not want Leah to hear that. He still wishes that had never happened. So anyway, we have here, why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing, with music of timbrels and harp? Do you think he would have done that? No, remember, he had already told him once he wanted to leave, and Laban didn't want him to leave. And so you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. Yeah, well, here he is stealing from them, basically. He is trying everything he can to use up their husband, and which would be their father's strength. So his grandchildren are not going to have anything. That's okay for him to deceive them, but for them to be taken away without letting him kiss them, what a horrible thing. So this is really blustering. This is where somebody says, after all I've done for you, you know, I'll never forget, and I'm not going to concentrate on this too much, but I ran away from home. And the reason is, you know, my dad, the way he was acting at the time, and so I left. And praise God, I was able to get into the Citadel full 4-year scholarship, and I believe that was God blessed me before I was ever saved. He got me into the Citadel. I didn't have to pay for anything. While I was in the Citadel, because of my grades, I was offered a special scholarship that gave me $1,500 a month, so I never had to go back home and live under my parents' money. I was able to take care of myself. And I remember that while I was in the Navy, after I had graduated, and I worked hard to graduate, I worked hard while I was in the Navy, and then I heard my dad had cancer. My mom was begging me to come help because they were about ready to get kicked out of their neighborhood. The HOA was upset. Their hedges were above the top of the roof. Their grass hadn't been mowed in a long time. And she said, Louis, I know that you don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, at that time, I am now a deacon at Black Creek Baptist Church, and I'm sitting there going, what a shame that I'm helping all kinds of elderly people all around here and not even helping with my own parents. So I decided to go help. And Ruth Ann will tell you, I took 2.5 tons of hedge brush to the dump that was there in Charleston. And it took me 5 days to get everything. I remember mowing a lawn. It's the first time I ever mowed a lawn where I ran into a lawnmower that had gotten eaten up by grass. The grass had won. It had actually gone up through the lawnmower and ate the lawnmower. And I hit it. And I go, what is that? And I went around and hit it. Found a lawnmower that had been eaten by grass. And so, but I got all that cleared up. The yard was looking good. And I was getting ready to leave. And my dad goes, Louis. He just shut. And so you're just going to leave? You're not even? And I go, I got the yard done. That's what I want to do. And he goes, so you're not even going to come in and talk? You're not even going to? He goes, good son you are, after all I've done for you. And I stopped and I looked at him. And he goes, you wouldn't be nothing if it wouldn't be for me. I'm the one that taught you to work. And this is the only time I ever, and I promise you, I never hit my dad, even though he hit me a lot of times, and I never, ever cursed him or said anything bad. But I did say that. I said, Dad, I am what I am in spite of you, not because of you. And I got in the car and I left. Now, praise God that later on both of us cooled off. And I got an opportunity to share the gospel with him and all those things. And I know my dad had, PTSD from the war and all these various things. But, when you're living it, it just hurts when people are doing things to you. Well, this is a case where Laban is saying, I have blessed you, Jacob. I've given you the opportunity to work for me for 20 years. And look what you've done to me. That's what I'm saying, that Laban has been abusive, a cheater, lazy, letting Jacob make him rich, and now he's blaming Jacob because Jacob don't want to live with him and with his family. Now you get the picture? So that's what's going on here. Some people feel sorry for Laban when they read this, but you should not. All right, so then he goes, here in verse 20, I have the power to harm you. I have the power. He also had the desire to harm him. And he says, but look what he says, but last night the God of your father, what do you hear there? The God of your father said to me, not my father. He didn't say my God. He didn't say our God. He's saying the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone out because you long to return to your father's household, But why did you steal my gods? Now remember, that's one of the things Rachel did on the way out the door. Verse 19, when Laban had gone to Shur, Rachel stole her father's household god. Well, that just shows you that Rachel still had, you know how you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. Well, you can take a girl out of idolatry sometimes, but the idolatry is still affecting. What was going on in that family was still affecting her. And so I believe she needed those little gods, because they had a god for the harvest. They had a god for the planting season. They had a god to bring rain. They had a god. And so, here she's going, my husband's a hard worker, but just to make sure, I don't want to anger any gods out there, so I'm going to make sure we take these gods with us and we use these to help in our future. Because wherever we're going, there's no guarantee we'll be successful. So maybe one of these gods or all of them will help us. So that's the good luck charms that people sometimes have. So she's doing that. Well, of course, Laban now has an excuse. He can say, all right, I understand that you wanted to go, and you had every right to take your flocks and your children. I wish you hadn't deceived, but you did steal my gods, which gives me the right to act this way. Well, of course, Jacob says, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. That's why he deceived. But if you find anyone here that has your gods, that person shall not live. Now, imagine if you're Rachel sitting there. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now, Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and to the tent of two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods, put them inside her camel saddle, and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her, don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your bed. I'm having her menstrual cycle. The Bible's kind of right out there, by the way. This is real life, real people. And let me tell you something, that would work with me. That would work with me. If my daughter, if I said, hey, I need you to, she goes, hey, I'm out of here. So Laban takes that and goes. So once again, if you live a life of deception, don't be surprised if you're being deceived. And he got deceived again. So Jacob, when he ended up not finding the gods anywhere, of course, Jacob still didn't know that Rachel had them. And so now he is indignant. Now you're going to see Jacob has a lot of courage here. Remember, Laban still has an army. Laban could still kill them. But Jacob knows that he has integrity and that he has done everything to benefit Laban, and God intervened to actually take it away from Laban because Laban had tried to deceive him and trick him. So Jacob, when you walk with God, it gives you a lot of courage. When you know that you have not lied and not stolen and not done anything to trick, and you know the person that is attacking you is in the wrong, man, that gives you a lot of courage. But you're going to see he doesn't have this courage with Esau. And that's important. You're going to see the difference because he knows he wasn't being really good brother to Esau. But he could stand up against Laban. And so that's what the Bible says, that when a man walks with integrity with God, he can stand before an army of 1,000, but a liar and a cheater will run from a shadow. So that's what's going on. So he goes, what is my crime, he asked Laban. How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your... Now he's really rubbing it into me now. He goes, just set it out here so that we can all see what I've done wrong. Of course, Laban just... He said, I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried. See, meaning he said, every time one of them was, I was always, even if it made me stay up all night long, I always made sure that I protected the pregnant ones. I made sure that you didn't lose any stock because of my negligence. And he goes, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. In other words, he wasn't stealing from the company. Do you know sometimes people will steal from the company they work from? They will take things. The biggest thing that man steals from companies are time. When they are supposed to be working and instead they take breaks, you know. But they want to be paid their full wage, even if a lot of it is spent on break or around the water cooler or around the coffee machine. I always said when I was in the Navy that if I didn't care about my lungs, I should have been a smoker, because I could have done a whole lot less work if I could have had all the smoke breaks a lot of other people. You know what I'm saying, for those of you that don't smoke? For those of you that do, love you. All right. But he goes, he says something here. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. There is a shepherd's code in their day that, let's say a wolf came in and grabbed a sheep and took off with it. All right, well, you owed that sheep, whatever that was worth, you owed that to your man, because you didn't protect the flock from that wolf. However, if you brought back pieces of that sheep, meaning you tracked down that wolf and you found the pieces of the sheep and all, that meant that you had courage, that you were trying to protect the rest of the flock, then you wouldn't know anything. Well, what he said is that it didn't matter. I did not try in any way to excuse any animal that got lost. I blamed it on me. I took the full brunt of it. But look what he said. And you demanded payment from me, whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. Notice he said, I worked for your 2 daughters for 14 years. Is that really a true statement? No, he worked for one 14 years in actuality, because those first 7 years he was working for Rachel, but he didn't get Rachel. But he worked again another 7 years so he could have her. But notice how kind that was for him to say, I worked for your 2 daughters for 14 years. He included her in on that. And so I'm sure that helped with the household. If the God of, and he said, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. Laban answered Jacob. Now when you just read it like this, but it's almost like this would be a good drama. It's Laban gets upset. He's being blasted, and he knows he's wrong. He goes, what are you talking about? These are my daughters. These are my children. Everything here belongs to me. Well, once again, that just shows you his heart, is that he's not giving credit to the fact that, no, you sold them. No, you did not bear any of these children. These children are from Jacob and his wife. But he believes he owns everything. Have you ever had people in your life that no matter what you do, ultimately, it doesn't matter. They're the most important thing in the room, and they're the one that needs to get the credit for everything? And so that's what's going on here. So, but anyway, he says, yet, what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? He said, I can't do anything because I know what God would do to me. So come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar, and he said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and they piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar, Sadahudath, whatever, and Jacob called it Galid. Galid, by the way, means a heap of witness. So they had these big stones, and the idea was if anybody saw those big stones all piled up, they would know that that is the witness between Laban and Jacob, that they made a covenant there. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it is called Galid. It was also called Mizpah because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. Now, I want to just, if you underline this, there's such things as called the Jewish Mizpah blessing, and this is where they get it from. But don't get caught up with that, because only rabbis could twist this, because this is not a good thing. But it's used sometimes when two friends are getting ready to part, or a son's getting ready to go off to college. They want to do the Mizpah blessing. The Mizpah blessing, and it's like, may God watch between you and me. May God, and the concept is that this blessing is used to say, while we're apart from each other, may God bless you, may God bless me until we come together. It's taken from here. This is the Mizpah blessing. Mizpah is literally watchtower, which, by the way, Jehovah's Witness used the Mizpah, this Mizpah blessing. So what you have is the watchtower. And when he says the Lord watch Mizpah, the Lord is Jehovah. The Jehovah's watchtower is what this is. And what he's saying is that while we're apart, but Laban is not using this as a blessing. What he's basically saying is, may your God watch you because you're untrustworthy and you would probably want to break this covenant. Laban is the bad guy here, but he's making it out as if Jacob needs somebody watching him, you know. And so you got to pick this up, but it's there. May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat, see, now it's all on him. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take well, he hadn't mistreated them for 20 years. They wanted to go with him. They didn't want to stay with Laban. And if you take any wives beside my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. Well, what about his deal? What is he supposed to keep? Nothing. It's all on Jacob. So this is a case where he's actually saying, may the Lord watch just how bad of a person I believe you're going to turn out to be. But this is called the Mizpah blessing, and it sounds all nice and sweet when two people are departing. May God watch between you and me until we come back together, blah, blah, blah. All right, that's all I can go for on today. But like I said, when you first read this, it just seems like there's a bunch of stuff that means nothing. But I also want you to walk in their shoes and see that when we're dealing with lost people as Christians, a lot of times they'll want to cheat us. We know they're cheating us. And the way we handle it, if we're not careful, will make us a bad witness to them. And Jacob became a bad witness. But at the same time, God was showing Jacob, I've got this. I've got this. You don't have to be about it. You don't have to, when someone slaps your face, you don't have to slap them back. You can turn the other cheek. I've got this. And Jacob still hasn't got it yet, and you're going to see it. But there's going to come a time that Jacob does. But that's for Paul Harvey's rest of the story when we get to it. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.